So last week we had to cancel because of the software, but we were talking a little bit beforehand. I remember you saying you're a Liverpool fan. I want to get back into that a little bit because ahead of this week, Liverpool's looking really good right now in the league. Still working out their midfield, I think. Their midfield looks really good, but their attack right now is just too powerful. I think their defense needs some work. But I mean, I think your attack alone will get you top 3. I don't really see.
Sure. Yeah, it's going to be hard to beat Man City when you're backed by unlimited resources.
It's the way it's the way of the game now.
Yeah, I know, but yeah, Tottenham look very solid. After losing Harry Kane, obviously question marks as to how they'll step up in terms of their attack, but so far they look good. I haven't watched a Tottenham match yet this season. Unfortunately, I'm going to miss the game this weekend because or is it this weekend that Tottenham Liverpool play? Yeah.
No, it's the North London Derby. North London Derby's on Sunday.
Okay.
We play next week. So that'll be
next week.
That'll be a fun game to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the only thing I'll say is like on Tottenham is like I'm just happy to see like full tilt football again. I like 3 years of Mourinho and Conte. It's just like God, it's just miserable.
Mourinho will kill anybody's interest in football,
Right. And what's
funny? So when I mentioned that my good buddy Andy McNally, he's who got me into Liverpool, and he I was doing a sabbatical in Cambridge for about 5 months with Matt Gaunt, good friend of mine.
Yeah.
Anyway, Andy had come over to Liverpool, and he said, "Hey, you want to come up and see a match?" While I was, in the UK, I was absolutely. And so he had a season ticket. So we get to Anfield, and he goes, "Here's your ticket." And I was like, "Where's yours?" And he's like, "You're going to the game. I've been to plenty." He's like, "I only have one ticket." So he's a great guy. Anyway, that was the Man U Liverpool match where Man U, we beat Man U. I think it was 3-1, 4-1, and that was Jose Mourinho's last match. So he got sacked after that.
Oh my God! You talk about a perfect fan experience. I mean, I've only heard great things about going to Anfield, and arguably United, you're probably your biggest rivals. Some people say Merseyside with Everton, but honestly, it's Liverpool. United is the most heated rivalry.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, I mean, as your first game at Anfield, playing United, winning like that, I mean, that must be like
incredible.
You can't even beat that feeling. That's an amazing experience.
When the crowd starts singing "You'll Never Walk Alone," that's quite an experience. It's
chilling.
Cool.
I imagine it's got to be chilling.
It was. It was very cool.
That's incredible. Well,
yeah,
it's always nice to talk ball with people in chemistry, or just sports in general, honestly. So we do have other hobbies, people. We do have other hobbies.
Yeah, exactly.
But getting back into it though, so Professor,
you can call me Dave. Don't call me Professor.
I know. I just want to introduce you to the audience at least. So
right, okay.
I'll start calling you Dave, but I can't. I'm going to butcher your last name because I'm not Polish. Dave
okay.
Nicewicz. I think that's it. Nicewicz.
Yep.
Nicewicz.
I should spell it out phonetically.
Yeah.
On my website or something. I don't know.
It is Polish, right? That's got to be Polish.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, my dad's from Poland.
Excellent. So you went to undergrad, UNC Charlotte. So I imagine you're from the Charlotte area, or at least the North Carolina area.
No, I grew up in New Jersey. Actually, that's where my family's from, and had some family in the Charlotte area, so decided to just get out of New Jersey, honestly, and go somewhere different. And it ended up being a really good experience for me. My undergraduate advisor, Craig Ogle, he's now retired, but he was a great mentor, and I was already pretty excited about organic chemistry, but I think he certainly sealed the deal for me, and brilliant scientist. I mean, I think he's incredibly underrated. He did a lot of really interesting studies on the structure of organocuprates at extremely low temperatures by NMR, and actually isolated one of the first sort of the pi complex, where the copper complexes to an enone at minus like 100 or 120, something like that. So
Wow. Okay.
he characterized all this by NMR. So yeah, I really got some awesome sort of research background to get me going by the time I hit graduate school. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely sounds like for undergraduate. Were you working on this stuff? Were you helping work like?
No. I was
Okay.
doing. No, I did some other stuff that we didn't publish, but we were trying to make at the time chiral cuprates to do an enantioselective conjugate addition chemistry, and we got a little bit of something, but nothing enough to publish, and I honestly didn't. I wasn't as skilled at the time and couldn't carry it forward.
Fair enough,
but good experience for sure.
Just going back on that real quick, because you mentioned from Jersey. So I grew up Southeast Pennsylvania, so very familiar with New Jersey. And my dad, he grew up in Brick, so I'm very familiar with I'm very familiar with like Central and South Jersey. Where are you originally from in Jersey?
I'm from North Brunswick, New Jersey.
North Brunswick.
Yeah. The only claim to fame that I'm aware of is that the former Everton keeper,
Tim Howard,
the U.S. Yeah, he's from North Brunswick, New Jersey. Yep.
After his performance in the 2014 World Cup against Belgium, there's got to be a statue of him somewhere.
Yeah. Incredible keeper.
Great longevity. I'm not a big fan of him as a sportscaster, though. I don't know. I feel like he just doesn't do the business for me.
There's not enough. I don't know how to. I agree with you. I can't quite put my finger on it.
For me, he speaks a little too slowly. Like it's just not like. That's just what it boils down to.
Right.
But I can't take away his great career as a goalie. And,
phenomenal.
I'm still butthurt about that loss against Belgium in the World Cup.
It was entertaining match for sure, though.
Now, coming out of the Brunswick area, now were you always fond of, let's say, like in the STEM fields, like growing up, whether through like junior high, high school? Like, how did that kind of all begin?
Great question. I had some really great science teachers, in particular, my high school chemistry teacher was fantastic. He was actually a Ph.D. and spent years in, I can't remember if he was at Dow for a number of years and then came back to teach high school. And, he, fantastic teacher, and kind of got me, I would say, on the path to being interested in that. Although I was always a kid that liked to tinker in the backyard with different things and observe nature and, whatever nature there is in New Jersey. No, I'm just kidding. But like a lot of kids probably that end up going into chemistry, at a chemistry kit growing up and kind of tinkered with that, to my parents' dismay, I'm sure, that when I made messes. But I was always curious about science and how the world works and how nature works, and so I think that was my lead into it.
So well, you mentioned moving out to UNC Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely can attest to like moving away from home for a bit to like kind of just be out on your own. But was there something particular about Charlotte that you like kind of really attracted you as an undergraduate, or?
Well,
I guess you mentioned your family there. I guess you said you did mention your family there,
but and I just wanted to get out and go somewhere else. Been in New Jersey all my life and really hadn't traveled much, to be honest, and so that seemed like a good place to escape to, so to speak. It's kind of wild that circumstances led me back here a few times, and in one way or another. So, I guess I've lived now in North Carolina longer than I've ever lived in New Jersey. and so it is my second. It's like my adopted second home, I suppose. Yeah.
Now I hear that. Now, when you were kind of starting to well, you did your master's degree there at Charlotte.
That's right. Yeah,
Now,
there's like a 1 + 1 year to do a master's degree after you do your bachelor's. So yeah.
Now, but then you did your PhD at Chapel Hill, so UNC Chapel Hill.
That's right.
Now, the decision kind of going to that, did it seem like a natural fit? I mean, like was grad school something you've like? When did you kind of know you want to do like, I guess a PhD? Because a master's degree technically is graduate school, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I'd always I got bitten by the research bug pretty early on, and I just love doing research. And I think I was advised by a few people, if you really love research and you want to do your own thing, then you should think about academia. And so I gave it serious consideration, and we can certainly talk about it, but it's lived up to some expectations, but not a lot of others in terms of academia. But for the most part, that's, I would say, why I got interested. I do love teaching, and especially when the students are engaged and asking questions, it's a ton of fun.
Yeah.
But yeah.
We'll definitely put a bullet point in that one to kind of return back to let's say the pitfalls of academia, because there certainly are a lot of them.
Sure.
Even I've only been here for 3 years, and I certainly can already see the cracks. And it's a good conversation to have. It's definitely a good conversation to have, though, for sure.
Yeah.
For students to know what they're getting into, let's say. And
absolutely.
even postdocs that are looking to get into academia, it's like, well, here's some things you should be aware of. But at your time now. Well, I guess why UNC Chapel Hill? Like, well, I assume. I mean, staying in North Carolina is very nice, but I was just curious.
Could have gone elsewhere.
Gone elsewhere.
So it was mainly Jeff Johnson, who was my PhD advisor. He was just starting out at the time. I really loved the ideas that he presented in the visitation weekend, and I was like, I got to work for this guy, There was another guy here at the time too, Jim Morkin, who's of course at Boston College now.
Yeah, BC.
And he also equally very interested in what Jim was doing, and it was a really hard decision. And Jim and I are, close, and I joke about it now. What might have been if I joined Jim's lab and this and that. But
quick side note, I love Professor Morkin's work right now. BC with like asymmetric like catalysis. I love all like boron reagents, copper stuff. It's all great, really cool stuff. But anyway,
great
sorry, I digress.
Yeah, no. I was at a conference in Singapore recently where he was one of the speakers as well, and I hadn't seen Jim talk in, it must have been 15, 20 years almost, and so it was fun to see him talk. And he was one of my professors, for my graduate courses, and learned advanced organic. Awesome teacher. All the faculty here are really great teachers. So, Jeff, awesome teacher, awesome science. Good friend of mine. When you start as a first graduate student in an assistant professor's group, you have sort of a different relationship with your advisor, and then as an advisor with your students, and your first class is certainly special, and that applied to me as well with my students. The bottom line is I was really excited about Jeff's research, and that's what made me come here.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yes, I know you did like Brook rearrangements, and you also did some total synthesis. So you mind breaking down like kind of like your research in that area?
Sure.
Let's talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, so that was one of the things that really got me interested in Jeff's group. Is he was really interested in a lot of rearrangement chemistry, sigmatropic and otherwise. And so we had we worked on some methodology first with some enantioselective sort of chemistry, where we would do. We worked mainly with these compounds called acylsilanes. So it's just think of a aldehyde, instead of a proton on the aldehyde, you've got a silyl group. And so when you add a nucleophile to that carbonyl, the oxyanion just plucks off the silicon because the oxygen silicon bond is stronger than the carbon silicon bond. And so what you do is you generate a new anion that can do further chemistry. And so Jeff and Jeff and a bunch of us obviously came up with ideas on how to do some cool cascade transformations so we can do. And so that kind of led into the Zaragozic acid synthesis, where Jeff had this really cool idea to make most of the core of Zaragozic acid via this cascade sequence using silyl glyoxylate. So basically, my contribution, I would say, in that time was I thought, well, the main thing you want to do to try to facilitate that silyl migration is to stabilize the carbanion you're making. And the best way to do it, we'd work with aryl acylsilanes, but no one had, or I don't think anyone before us had made alpha keto or alpha ester acylsilanes. And so I figured out how to make those compounds, and we call them silyl glyoxylates. And that actually, after we started working with those and they did some really nice chemistry, Jeff came up with this really cool retrosynthesis for Zaragozic Acid C. And so he's like, do you want to try this? And I said, yeah, sure. Yeah, that looks like a really cool molecule. So I had no idea what I was getting into. I mean, one of the most challenging projects I've ever worked on, for sure. But it's sort of when you, and then I'm sure there's a lot of students that can attest to this that may be in natural product synthesis. You have this love-hate relationship with your molecule after a while. You dream about it at night. You think about it, every free moment you have, and it kind of you're possessed by it in a way. And yeah, it's sort of a weird thing. So long story short, we got pretty far in the synthesis, and then we ran into this, the tricky part about this molecule, and you can take a look at it afterwards, but there's only 3 protons in the core of the molecule. So characterizing it was a complete nightmare at times. And so I actually mischaracterized an intermediate, and it turns out that we were further along than we thought. There was a little bit of a serendipitous discovery where there was this retro-aldol-aldol, which flipped the stereochemistry of the 1,2 diol to the right stereochemistry, and didn't know that because this is, and I love to tell this story, especially because I teach NMR now to graduate students. Pay attention to the coupling constants. The coupling constants gave it away in terms of what was happening here. So we were seeing splitting because we had this cis relationship between the 2 protons in a very fixed system. And then the retro-aldol-aldol flipped it so it was trans. So what was a strong J coupling turned into almost no J coupling at all because it was 90-degree dihedral angle. Long story short, I tried to push through and finish the synthesis before I started my postdoc, and almost got to the end, and I had to start my postdoc, otherwise I was going to lose my NIH fellowship. So
you poor thing.
luckily some of my fellow grad students at the time were able to push through to the end. But
that's awesome.
We got pretty far, but yeah, it was a pretty challenging project for sure.
Yeah. A question for you, because like obviously you had never done natural product synthesis before this, I think anyway.
Nope.
So like I find it, listen, I'm 2 years in. I'm pretty good at like organometallic chemistry, but natural product synthesis I've never done before. So like, is it intimidating? Like I find it like I look at other like graduate students that are like kind of like second year my age, and like they're doing natural product synthesis. Like how do you how do you guys like do this? I would find this so intimidating,
It is and it isn't. You have to adopt a different mindset, and once you get further into a synthesis, material management is very important. You're constantly having to bring up material behind you just in case you screw something up, you drop it on the benchtop, or that reaction didn't work, or reagent's bad. What I think it teaches you too is to really rigorously purify your reagents before you use them every time, because if something goes wrong, you may be 5, 8 steps in and you're going to have to start all over again. That could set you back a month, depending
Yeah.
on how well the chemistry works. But it's intimidating from the standpoint of you can get to, and we did this and we got to these points in Zaragozic acid, you, you, you feel like you're trapped. You hit a dead end, and sometimes you have to back out. And it can be hard to say, "Hey, we need to rethink and retool this synthesis because the ideas that we wanted to do just aren't working." And that's part of the learning process, though. I think the one thing I see, and I think everybody, experiences this, but I think I see more and more now as students getting frustrated too quickly with things that don't work. And I think the important thing to know is that research is mostly failure, to be honest.
Yeah.
Those little times of success are so sweet, and you'll realize it when you see them. But it can be hard to just be getting, punched in the, jaw for quite a while. And,
It's
you
true.
have to develop a thick skin, I suppose,
Yeah.
is the way to think of it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
As a when you're a graduate student, what are maybe like a few tips and tricks that you like learned as like doing natural product synthesis? Like, were there things that are like, I think other people should be doing this as well, or things that maybe made it more efficient, just in general,
Yeah.
or
Yeah, I think natural product synthesis is excellent, synthetic training in general. But I would say the things that I would suggest, again, material management is vitally important. Always don't ever use all of your material on a single step. Even if you know it works, things can happen. So I always split my material, going forward. Constantly thinking about backup plans. If your main, if your primary sort of route doesn't work, you should have a secondary, a tertiary route always ready to go, so that you're not frustrated and feel hopeless, I suppose. But also don't be afraid to try the latest and greatest chemistry. Um, that's what. So we're kind of getting into we're into natural product synthesis, and we've had a few molecules we've tried to go after that didn't work out for one reason or another. But we're really close on an alkaloid natural product from the Stamona alkaloid family. I'm pretty excited about that. And if it works out the way I think, it'll be a really nice story, because our initial plan didn't work out, but my student came up with a nice alternative route that was even better than the original route. And
nice.
If it works out, it'll be a really nice story. But the point is that we're using our chemistry photoredox catalysis to assemble the core of this molecule. And really, I think the purpose of what we're trying to do is kind of show people, hey, it's okay to try some very new chemistry in natural product synthesis. And we have some hopefully a really nice story to tell soon about that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I look forward to that like using photoredox for for total synthesis. I look forward to that. That should be really cool then, especially like you mentioned, your first route just didn't work, right? So that'll be I don't know if you have plans of putting that kind of in the publication, but I think that'd be pretty cool. I don't know. Okay.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
We will. I think it's good to be honest too, and I think people don't realize, one, that often your first, second, third ideas don't work, right? And then the second is there have been a lot of obviously accidental or serendipitous discoveries along the way. And I think that people are not as honest with the fact that those do occur. And I'll be the first to admit when they do. And sometimes the accidental discoveries are even better than what you had planned. And that's cool. That's science.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of it, honestly. Yeah, I agree. Those like little moments of success just go a long way, and
Oh
the
yeah.
serendipity of it sometimes, like,
Yeah.
luck favors the the prepared. So it's like,
That's right.
it's just
You make your
good
own luck,
moments.
as you say. Yeah.
Yep. But so after graduate school, we went to do a postdoc with Nobel laureate Dave MacMillan. What I'm curious though is, at what point? I mean, I assume postdoc just seemed natural then, because like you mentioned, you were kind of really into the
Yeah.
research. Okay.
Yep.
Now, was it at this point too, you were really considering becoming a professor as well?
Oh
Or
yeah. Yeah. At
okay.
that point, I was very much committed. I was maybe, not 100% sure once I was midway through grad school, but by the time I finished up my PhD, I was definitely committed and wanted to see if I could, test the waters. And so, Jeff and I talked about, who to apply to, and Dave's chemistry was always something we talked about in group meetings as like really cool stuff. And
Yeah.
he was at Caltech at the time, and I applied to his group, and he accepted me, and I was, excited. I was like, all right, Southern California for a couple of years.
SoCal.
And then about a month after he accepted me, he said, "Oh, we're moving to Princeton." And yeah, no, I mean, Princeton was an awesome place.
Princeton is beautiful. Let's have it right.
Yeah. I just wanted to go somewhere different, because I'm
sure.
literally 20-minute drive from Princeton. My mom worked as an admin actually at Princeton University, literally next door to where Frick Lab, which is the chemistry building.
Yeah.
So I knew Princeton inside and out, and I just wanted to experience something different. So it was a little disappointing, but
you can't escape Jersey. They won't allow you.
Yeah. But it was I think it was scientifically one of the most fun times of my life, because and this is something that I like to tell my students, and this and that, is postdoc is a great time because you have very little responsibility. Like, you don't have to take coursework, you don't have to do a thesis, you don't have maybe a research proposal to write. You're just there doing the science, and that's why I got into what I did in Dave's lab, is because I had unlimited time to just think about the science, and that's something I don't get the luxury of as much these days, which is unfortunate. But
the admin work, you got the admin work now.
Oh God, don't get me started on it. We'll get to that. You'll have to ask about that. Yeah.
No, I say this all the time. Initially, I was like, postdoc, like, I don't know, it sounds like, but the more people I talk to, and now, granted, I do talk to a lot of professors, so they always kind of, it is kind of, so it is somewhat of an echo chamber. But there are really, like you mentioned, you're there for the science. You don't have to worry about a dissertation. You don't have to worry about like any of that stuff. You're just there for the science. And unfortunately for you, unfortunately, you had to move back to Jersey, but you can more or less move wherever you want as long as the professor obviously will take you. So you can the options are there.
Right.
And you can kind of live wherever for a year or two, just doing science. So that sounds super attractable to me. That sounds super fun.
And I think the other thing too, and I don't mean to in any way rag on New Jersey or anything like that. Princeton's amazing because it's kind of in this little bucolic bubble in part of New Jersey that is beautiful, and the campus is gorgeous, and the Princeton has a lot of resources, so it really makes doing science a lot easier, I think. But the thing, there were a couple of things that were rewarding. Obviously, having the time to think about the science, but also the people you meet. I was contemporaries with Dave McGee, Rob Knowles, Andy McNally, Nate Dewey, all awesome people, and then a ton of people that are awesome that are in industry, like John Wilson, Mark Scott, Sebastian Renley. I have all these, and we're still very close friends to this day. In fact, they're some of my closest friends that I've maintained relationships with, and we still get together from time to time. And it's great. So
Yeah,
I wouldn't trade that period of I wouldn't do anything different with that period of my life. It was great.
that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I listen. The endowment at Princeton's crazy, and you got to use that to your
Mhm.
advantage. You got to use it to your advantage. The
Absolutely.
chemistry
Yeah.
department there is state of the art, and I mean
And
there's some
they've
brilliant
hired
minds
some
there.
amazing faculty. They have some amazing students come through there. They're, as
Yeah,
far as I can tell, they're doing
yeah,
things right. So
they are.
yeah. Hmm.
So, but onto your work though, with
Hmm.
Professor MacMillan. I mean,
Hmm.
you were. I mean, you were the one of the. You were the one that pioneered the ruthenium photoredox catalysis. I don't
Yep.
know. I will say though, I don't. I'm unfamiliar with this kind of area, so I don't know. Like,
Okay.
had anyone in the area, or was photoredox in general, like kind of
Hmm.
that coinage, was it used in the literature at all? Like, I don't know how this
Yeah.
kind of came to be.
So yeah, so I'll kind of give you sort of a background on how that kind of came to be. So photoredox catalysis was certainly, around for decades before
Okay.
we came along. But um, I would say that research goes through periods of different interest. I would
Yeah.
say, and organic chemistry certainly. I think you had your cross coupling and asymmetric catalysis, Lewis acid catalysis that were the end of the last century were the big sort of focal points, right? And that's
Yep.
all polar chemistry. And then it was organocatalysis. And then, people sort of, for whatever reason, in the synthetic community, didn't pay as much attention, I would say, to radical chemistry. That's not to say there weren't some great people doing, radical chemistry, but I would say, by and large, people were more focused on polar chemistry. I forgot, of course, metathesis in there as well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It was a huge thing as I was starting graduate school, and I thought, alkene metathesis is still one of my favorite reactions. It looks like magic when you draw it on paper, right?
It does.
Um, but so, when I got started in Dave's lab, Dave, it was a great environment for me because Dave, had a couple of problems that he wanted me to work on, but he's like, if you have any other ideas you want to try, go for it. Um, and so he said, one of the long-standing challenges in the group is to do alpha alkylation of aldehydes
Okay.
selectively, right? And he kind of told me, here's the problems and challenges with that, and this and that. So in the group at the time, this area called somocatalysis, which is where you have the catalytically generated enamines and you oxidize those to the cation radicals, and then
Mm.
those do chemistry. That was just hitting the, I would say, pinnacle as I was getting there. And I hadn't really thought much about radical chemistry, to be quite honest, up until that point. And so I started reading, which is a great advantage of doing a postdoc, is I just read as much as I could about radical chemistry. And then I started to think about this problem that Dave said is the alpha alkylation. And I was like, what if we break this up into actually like radical processes, radical steps, where you generate an electrophilic radical that would pair really nicely with a catalytically generated enamine because the polarity of those two species are matched.
Mm.
Then you get to an alpha amino radical. And if you think about it in a redox sense, you essentially need to lose an electron from that alpha amino radical. And I liked this because it was a redox balanced equation. And so I started thinking about, all right, what if we throw in like catalytic amounts of, redox active metals like zinc or things like that could do. Nothing really worked. And then, I thought about the research that actually was going on at UNC Chapel Hill with ruthenium trisbipyridine. So my former colleague, he just retired a couple of years ago, Tom Meyer. He's I like to call him the godfather of Rubipi because he did all the photophysical measurements on Rubipi. He made tons
Mm.
of derivatives, and they ultimately were using Rubipi to do like water splitting and obviously a lot of other metal bipyridal complexes to do water splitting, right? And so, I looked at Rubipi and I said, I don't know why Rubipi couldn't do this. And and I kind of looked up the redox potentials, and back then the redox potentials of organics were scattered, and you couldn't find it very easily. But I said, it might work, and I I swear to you, and I would love to find the notebook page again. The first reaction I tried worked, and
Wow.
with and not only worked, but worked extremely well. And it was one of those moments where literally setting it up, I'm like, this isn't going to work. And I tried it, and it was funny. I love, so one of my hobbies is planted aquariums. And so I had
Oh
an
wow. Okay.
aquarium at home because we didn't have any photochemical equipment in Dave's group at the time, which is kind of funny to think about now because I'm sure he has every blue light known to man. But I actually set it up with an aquarium light next to the reaction, and it
That's
worked.
amazing.
Yeah, it was the single most exciting reaction I think I've ever done in my life. And I Dave was away at the time, and I came back, and I showed him the reaction. He's like, how do you think the mechanism of this works? And I said, I'm not sure yet. And I drew up a mechanism. He's like, we're sending this to science, and I don't think either one of us kind of knew just how big this area would get, and
Mm-hmm.
traction, and how much you could actually do with this chemistry. And that to me is the coolest thing, is just seeing, now we're seeing so many applications to materials chemistry, to biology, and it's just hard to wrap your head around. And one of my friends was saying, he saw blue lights in his department. He's like, this is all your fault. But
That's incredible.
yeah, it's really cool. But to be quite honest, that whole area of photoredox catalysis, both organic and inorganic and organometallic, I mean, that's been around for decades. It's just not been really, and it's not to say there weren't people doing, or hadn't done organic reactions with photoredox catalysts. It's just that I think that the community wasn't captured by that at the time. And then as time goes on, you see more and more of what you can do with it. People are like, oh wow, that's pretty powerful. So
Mm-hmm.
it's cool.
No, I definitely hear you. Um, it definitely seems like the community goes through like these phases of like what's
Hmm.
in, what's out.
That's right.
Right now, it seems like I don't know any like bicyclo molecules seem to really hit a lot right now for some reason.
Yep.
Like cubanes are in right now.
Yep.
Like I don't know, like they just are.
Yep.
Um, to be fair, they look really cool, so I
Uh-huh.
get why they're aesthetically pleasing. But
Yeah, and from a medchem standpoint, I think that's where the interest comes in, to be bioisosteres for disubstituted benzenes and
yeah,
things like that.
great
So yeah.
word too. It's like bioisosteres. So it's like, but no, I think that's super cool. And what's most interesting, I guess, is that yeah, as you mentioned, you didn't think it was gonna work. Like it was just like, all right,
No.
let's screw it, let's just try this and
Oh,
see what happens.
yeah.
And
Yeah, I
um,
remember even, I was showing Rob Knowles, good friend of mine. I remember drawing it up on the board, and I was like, "Do you think this is a mech?" He's like, "It could be," and
yeah,
he's like, "That's wild," So yeah, it was fun to, because you use the people in the lab, as your sounding board, and making sure that what you're saying and doing isn't crazy, because it's always right to question your results, always right to question your hypotheses.
hmm
And certainly when you have a lot of really smart, talented people around you to ask questions of, it made the experience all the better. And the learning curve just was like this, it was incredible.
So a couple questions on this work then is
Uh-huh.
obviously time's passed now, so I'm sure you know a lot more about the mechanism and things like that. What I'm particularly interested in, one is the mechanism of how it works. I think the audience definitely would love to hear like how this works, and also too, I don't know if you know this, but where does the enantioselectivity come from? Like, what is
Ah,
there something
yep.
that
Yep.
what makes it chiral? I guess.
Yeah. So what I didn't mention was the first time I actually was doing this reaction was uh, just taking it's like an alpha bromo ester and then an aldehyde plus imidazolidinone catalyst, which Dave's group really pioneered that enamine aminium catalysis mode, and of course Ben List's group has done
Yep.
some amazing enamine catalyzed transformations. So so initially I actually was able to get the light direct photolytic reaction to work with 300 nanometer light, which is a little bit more tricky. And you know, didn't know at the time, and Paolo Melchiori, who's done some really awesome work, uh, found that these form donor acceptor or charge transfer complexes, where literally the electron rich and electron poor species can form sort of encounter complexes in solution, and you're actually photolyzing that such that the enamine transfers an electron to the alkyl halide, that fragments to give a radical, and then you get radical recombination in the solvent cage
Oh,
before
wow.
things can happen. Or it can escape, and then you get enamine reacting with radical. Anyway, um, the way that we think this works is that, and we didn't know this at the time, and did some transient absorption experiments. Uh, Dave sent me to Jim McCusker's lab at Michigan State, and I like to call Jim my Uncle Jimmy because he's like the guy that taught me transient absorption spectroscopy. So he likes that. But anyway, we found that so you mix you have the imidazolidinone and an aldehyde. It condenses to make an enamine,
Mm-hmm.
and so if you preform that enamine, and it takes a while, you can just sit it over sieves and just drive the water off, and that pushes the equilibrium to the enamine. It turns out that that quenches the excited state of ruthenium 2 and reduces
Mm.
it to ruthenium 1. That turns out to be the active reductant. That reduces the alkyl halide to give you the electrophilic radical.
Mm-hmm.
That electrophilic radical combines with the enamine and then gives you the alpha amino radical. And then to complete the redox cycle, that alpha amino radical can either, in a chain event or involving RuBiPi, transfer an electron to another molecule of alkyl halide, or it can be reoxidized by the ruthenium. Either, I think that one can even happen. Oh no, that one has to be probably photo redox, photo oxidized rather than ground state. What controls the enantioselectivity is the enamine, and this is what the imidazolidinone catalyst comes in. You have two bulky groups. It's sort of C2, the ones that I was working on, and it was counterintuitive because at the time, uh, in the group, the imidazolidinones have two groups, and they're typically cis to one another.
Okay.
It's like a T-butyl on one side, and the other side is like a benzyl group. But the ones that I found gave me the highest EE are the ones where it's actually trans to one another.
Hmm.
And in all the reactions prior to that, those catalysts didn't work very well. What what ended up, I think, working in this case is that the fact that that enamine can rotate, you almost have a C2 symmetrical group. One's a benzyl, one's a T-butyl, so it's not really the same. But both the T-butyl or benzyl group, no matter which rotamer it is, blocks the same face of the alkene, and that is where you get your enantioselectivity from the radical addition step. So little harder to explain without some drawings, but
No, for sure.
that hopefully will help you understand. But the learning about radical polarity and alkene polarity and how that matches with radical polarity was a key insight to getting that reaction to work. And honestly, Philippe Renaud, who's at University of Bern, he published a paper where you take preformed enamine, stoichiometric enamine, and he generated radical obviously a different way, but he showed that basic sort of transformation. So that was like one key step in what we were doing, and I've talked to Philippe. Actually, I was at when I was in Europe a couple weeks ago. Philippe Bruno was the conference organizer, and we chatted about that. And he and I had a pretty nice conversation about that. Yeah,
I'm glad to see radical chemistry in general is getting its due diligence because I don't know the same for you, but like as an undergrad, I just remember like drilled in my brain like radicals are too unstable, and so like
yeah,
we really are
yeah.
doing a disservice now. Like it just
I couldn't agree more. Yeah,
we need to
it's
re-change how that's taught.
I totally agree. I think that it's a shame because there's so many biological processes that happen via radical, right?
Yeah.
Cytochrome
Yeah,
oxidation. There's
cytochromes.
many cofactors that happen via one electron or radical chemistry. We heard a great talk yesterday in the department from Squire Booker, who's at Penn State, and he does stuff elucidating radical SAM methylation mechanisms. But the bottom line is, you're absolutely right. We learn radicals are unstable, uncontrollable, and we learn maybe one or two reactions as undergraduate. Someone has to rewrite the textbook. It's not going to be me, but
I know.
I really do think that radical chemistry deserves equal airtime with polar chemistry because they're both complementary to one another in terms of their reactivity. And once you learn some basic principles of radical reactivity, I think you can pretty much intuitively, like you would for polar chemistry, determine what reactivity that you can derive from them.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right. I mean, the complementary to it, and I think from an undergrad perspective, I think it'd be really easy, right? So, polar addition would be like anti-Markovnikov, and then the flip side to that would be a radical addition would be Markovnikov addition. I think. Hopefully, I think I have that right.
Other way around,
like
but yeah, right.
Damn it! All right,
No,
other way around.
Okay.
But you understand what I'm saying.
There's
complementary activity, even at an undergraduate level, that I can understand. So, I'm certainly not going to write the textbook anytime soon. That's for sure. I'm definitely not going to do it. I don't know anything about. I don't know that much about it, but someone should do it. So hopefully we'll see. Though, to be fair, I mean, polar chemistry, I guess, has just so much more time, I guess, and but over the last 15, 20 years, radical chemistry certainly has caught up. So hopefully within the next 5 years, and like someone will start writing the textbook and really flip the paradigm.
Yeah, and I think too that the physical organic chemists deserve a ton of credit for really establishing the reactivity in this. I mean, Jay Kochi, I think of like electrochemists like Kevin Moeller and Dan Little, that did a lot of, honestly, some of the basic reactivity. Nathan Bald, who used to be at UT Austin, he's one of my, he was, when I was starting my independent career, I read a ton of Nathan Bald's work because he did a lot of, electron transfer to generate alkene cation radical species. There's a ton of people, in that area that really deserve a lot of credit for laying the groundwork to helping us to develop the transformations that I think are quite useful.
Yeah. So moving on then, after your postdoc, you had went to, you got hired at UNC Chapel Hill and you've been there ever since. I mean, did it line up really nicely? I mean, I don't know how that opportunity arose,
that's an interesting story too. Yeah. So I interviewed at the height of the financial crisis in 2008. And I remember,
tough one.
I think at some point I must have had about 15 or 16 interviews lined up. And I would say about half of them got canceled before I even got to the interview, half of them got canceled either before I went to the interview or after I went to the interview. Things were canceled. At least that's what they told me. Maybe they didn't want to hire me, and it was a good excuse. But anyway, even including UNC, and UNC had to cancel their search, and my former colleague Mike Crimmins was chair at the time, and he called me up and he said, we managed to find a pot of money that we have to use, I guess, must have been for my startup at the time. But if we don't use it in the next few days, the state is going to claw that money back,
Oh
and
no.
so he's like, I don't want to put time pressure on you, but you have time pressure, so you have to decide. So I had offers at two other schools, and I knew what the environment here was like, and I really loved the faculty and still do. And I knew it would be a really great environment for me to get started, and so it was a pretty easy decision for me to make, but it was certainly scary. I thought that I wasn't going to have a job, and it turned out the subsequent year, very few schools were hiring, and so it was kind of scary for a few years there. So I think that what people have to also keep in mind is that we're going through some pretty uncertain times, for a lot of different reasons, and I
Yeah.
think that the more you can do to make yourself very marketable in terms of your skills, your abilities, your knowledge, do as much as you can, because I think the competition is going to get tighter, not easier. And I wish it were different, but I just think that those are going to be the times, at least in the immediate future, that we're going to see. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, I was talking to a few professors about this, particularly like in academia. I think the bar, there's so many professors who are just stellar, and the bar
Uh-huh.
just keeps getting like it just keeps rises because the work is just so good. So it's
It's
like
hard.
it's hard to get it. Well, it's hard to get a job, well, anywhere, but particularly in academia, like it's super difficult because
The-
the bar's just so high.
yeah, the bar has changed a lot since even I've started. I've been, let's see, what has it been, 14 years or so, a little
Yeah.
over 14. Um, you know, I think too, you have now more academic groups as well, which makes things challenging. Like, you have a lot of really awesome groups in China now that were honestly there were only a handful as I kind of started my independent career, and now there's so many, and they're doing great science, and so um, it can be tough, and I certainly don't have as many resources as a lot of other schools or maybe other PI have. So it can be challenging if you want to take on a really big, research problem to
Right.
compete, and
Yep.
then I feel for everybody that had to start during the pandemic, both grad students and faculty. I had one of my former faculty or former graduate students, Nate Romero, who started at UC San Diego in 2020, and like, man, I feel, yeah. I
2020
mean,
California is just, oh man,
yeah,
brutal.
it was rough, but I think he's doing well, but it's challenging times, and then I think the other thing that's really difficult now, and has changed so much since I started, is keeping up with the literature. My God, there's so many journals. And, it used to be where I would have about 12 to 15 journals. I would think when I was in graduate school, it would be like the New York Times. I'd get my coffee, and I'd go through the ASAPs every
Yep.
morning, see if there's anything that I'm interested in or need to know. Now I can't. I really cannot keep up with all the literature. It's tough. I rely on my students to some extent to talk about things in group meeting that are interesting and so forth. But it's really challenging. It's a very challenging environment. And then also on top of all that, I would say that the research funding has not increased at all, at least from on the federal level, which makes our job more challenging. So we're having to do more and more with less and less, and that is not a good recipe for science.
Yeah. Yeah. Just on both those points, you were right. There are so many journals now. Like I was as you were talking, I was like, screw it. Let me just check to see because I use an app called Feedly, which basically just
Yeah.
directs all the
Yep.
and like
It's
I'm
very
just looking. I'm
helpful.
look. It's a great app. First of all, if
Yeah.
there anyone's not using Feedly, highly recommend. But I'm
Yeah.
looking at this. I mean, I have just from yesterday, I have like 130. like new articles that got posted.
Yeah.
And oh my God, like, you can't keep up
It's
with it. You can't
no,
keep up with it.
it's really hard. And, I feel bad when I haven't seen, sometimes I go to lectures and I know I should have seen that article that someone's talking about. And it just passed me by, unfortunately. And
Mhm.
you feel bad about it, but there's only so much you can do to keep up with the literature.
I think the irony of it too is like even I find myself getting into this problem is like there's just so much. I just always end up. I always look for the authors. Well, maybe it's not necessarily a bad thing because like maybe I just look for authors that are particularly into my field.
Mhm. Mhm.
So maybe it's not a bad thing. But like if I don't have time to like expand my knowledge, if that makes sense. Like I'm already like consumed by my area,
Yeah.
so I I don't I just don't have time to like expand out. Like I fall
Yeah.
into the trap of I'm just clicking through until I find someone that I know or like it's
Yeah.
research pertaining to me. And it's a shame really, but I can't help it.
Yeah. But I think a good thing to do, and Feedly, this is certainly good, and obviously all the journals do this too, where they have the abstracts, and at least if in the abstract graphic, I can get a sense of what's going on, and what I'll do is, if there's a level of interest there for me, I'll read the abstract and I'll read the conclusion,
Yep. Yep.
to at least get a sense of, is this going to be something I want to take a deeper dive into. And then if it is, I'll read it in more detail. But honestly, these days I have to do that. Otherwise, I can't keep up. But
Yeah.
what I'll say with literature, and I tell this to my students all the time, is it is important to read outside of your area,
I
because
know.
often ideas like photoredox catalysis were generated because I decided to read outside of my area, and how can you apply something that is outside of your area? And this is something that Dave MacMillan always preached, and I 100% agree, is like that's the way you discover something new and exciting, is taking other areas of research outside of your own focus and seeing if you can apply that in some way. And it was always fun to, when we were in Dave's lab, people would try some wacky ideas, myself included. As long as you had some sort of scientific justification behind what you were doing, Dave was totally fine with it. But he
Yeah.
didn't want you just trying necessarily random
Yeah.
things in hope of, shooting in the dark and, finding something. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I hear you. Reading I mean, yeah, reading the abstract and conclusion, and a lot of times that's all you really need. Like, just kind of get what
Yeah.
obviously, like if it's in your field, that would be the time to kind of read, like, let's say the results and discussion.
Right.
But if it's kind of just something you're just merely passing or interested in, just read the abstract conclusion. That's really all you kind of need to know, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of times you can get most of what you need out of that.
Yeah. I want to go back real quick regarding the funding, because
Sure.
you can definitely speak on this more than I can. Again, one of the it's not really an issue of academia because it's not their fault. The funding is scarce,
Yeah.
but it's something to consider. I think if you're going in that position, it seems like to me, it feels like it's hard. One, it's hard to get funding because it seems like it has to be more applicable. Like
Hmm.
I feel like it's not about the fundamental science anymore. It's about,
Yeah.
well, how is this going to benefit? It's like, how is this work going to benefit the larger audience, the society, or
Hmm.
societal impacts, right?
Hmm.
Are we in drug development? Are we making new polymers? And if it doesn't kind of fit those mold, it doesn't seem like your idea is going to get taken up by funding. So I don't know
Yeah.
if that's kind of
Yeah.
a non.
I think you're totally correct on all those points. What I'll say is, I think applied science and basic science are in some ways almost equally important in my mind. And
Yeah.
the agency that funds basic science, the National Science Foundation, just doesn't have as much funding as it did,
Yeah.
20 years ago, and that's not good, because I think, look, if you give the best people funding to do the science that they think is interesting, you will find some very interesting and valuable things, and a lot of things that were found come from basic science, right? And you know, but that's not to say that we should be just necessarily,
Throwing
tinkering.
money, throwing out money
Yeah,
at
and I get it.
everyone.
We are using the public's money, right?
Yeah,
And that's something to be aware of. And the public wants to see the return on their investment. But, and this is what's so frustrating about the current political climate is that, you know, you can make a very strong argument for why science should be funded. I think I probably don't have the most recent data, but I think I read that for every $1 that the public gives or essentially puts into the NIH, the return on investment is $8. Right?
wow.
If you ask anybody in finance if that's a good return, obviously everybody would say, yeah, we'd be pretty satisfied with that. The wrong arguments are being made, I think, by our politicians about how to, get the public invested in it. And I mean, the benefits are huge, right? The health benefits. Unfortunately, the healthcare system is a complete disaster right now in the U.S., but it's because of I think of other reasons. But in terms of the technology that's
Yeah,
available now, it's incredible. I mean, some of my friends that have had to have surgeries and things like
right.
that, and
The
some
scientific
of the,
merit is definitely there. The scientific
oh
merit
yeah,
is there.
and some of the things that we're getting involved in radiology, which I think are
Yeah,
just really exciting. I think that the future is bright, but only if the public is committed to funding the science,
yeah.
and that's the hard part. And yeah,
I think the last point on this I'll make before we get to your research. I think it's kind
yeah,
of,
sure,
but and you could definitely put your opinion on this too. It seems like people, it's hard to take out the, let's say, the political implications of, like, especially, like, I would say within medchem, like all the people's perceptions of medchem, of like, and big pharma, big insurance versus,
agrochemical,
right,
agrochemical as
agrochemicals,
well. Yep,
all the political issues that come with that is not a reflection of, let's say, people doing the science. Like, no chemist is out
absolutely
there,
not.
like no chemist
No,
out there is thinking, whoa, we're gonna sell this drug on the market, we're gonna inflate the price.
no.
No, it's gonna,
Yeah,
like, it's just not,
I think
you
that's
know
a very, very excellent point. And I love going to pharma, to agrochemical, and meeting with the scientists. I mean, the scientists
yeah,
are just excited to be able to make an impact, a positive impact. That's why they do what they do. And then, some of my, I think the area that's particularly demonized is agrochemical industry, which I'm
yeah,
still perplexed about. But I think one of my favorite visits has been to agrochemical companies because like them actually testing like herbicides. You get to do that. You don't have to worry about, you're not doing in human trials. You're just doing, you're testing on plants. And so what's cool is you can see results right away and you don't have to wait. There's no sort of lag time, obviously, with the approval process that has to go up mentioning the patients. And they're really doing complex med chem on plants or
yeah.
insects, right? They're just, and the amounts of chemical they're using are just vanishingly small that, for an herbicide, for example, some of the herbicides that are most effective, you could apply the herbicide and have it be effective. You could swab the ground and I guarantee you couldn't detect the amount that they're using.
Yeah.
That's how far the agrochemical industry has come. And it's vitally important because as the planet just keeps getting more and more populated, we have to have higher yields for agriculture, or else you're not
We
going to
need
sustain the population.
we need more. We need more than just ammonia. We just put it.
Absolutely, yeah,
We need more than just ammonia. No, I hear you. Yeah, people just hear herbicides. They're like, oh, I would never. Like, like, I would never. It's like, I don't
yeah,
think you guys don't understand um the importance of this. But
absolutely.
it's a catch-all
Yeah,
word.
yeah,
Is what it
yeah.
is. And I don't know how
But
to fix it.
yeah, I
I don't
agree
know.
with what you said regarding scientists. The scientists are there because they want to make a positive impact, and are absolutely excited about the science, and I think that's unfortunately everything has become politicized nowadays, and that's one thing that is very unfortunate side effects. Yeah.
Yeah. I hopefully this turns around. I don't know how to fix any of these issues either, if I'm being completely
I don't
honest.
either.
But I'll keep complaining and not provide a solution. I'll just put
Yeah, me too.
um but getting back to so you do a lot of great work in organophoto redox catalysis.
Mhm.
I definitely want to touch on that. But
Sure.
also, yeah, your radio labeling I think is a super the positron emission tomography, and it just sounds really cool. Let's touch because we did talk about organic redox catalysis. I definitely let's go first to the radio labeling because I
Yeah,
think
sure.
I think it's just super cool.
Yeah,
fluorine 18, you can
yeah,
detect it, and it also just
yeah,
sounds really cool. I think to the like you can you can real time monitor like these things.
yeah.
So
So
I'll let you kind of go for it.
yeah, so this kind of again fell out of a research area we were looking at, which was arene CH functionalization. We developed some organic photoredox catalysis methods to do like carbon nitrogen, carbon cyanide, bond formation, carbon halide. And so, one of the things we were always interested in is trying to form carbon fluorine bonds on arenes because it's particularly challenging,
Yeah.
especially with organometallics. The reductive elimination step is very challenging, and actually this kind of was when Tobias Ritter gave a talk at UNC years ago. He was doing some of this, F18 labeling of aromatics, and I kind of was really intrigued about the area and didn't know much about it. But the basics for those that may not know about positron emission tomography is that unstable isotopes, positron emitting isotopes like fluorine 18, they emit positively charged electrons. In our universe, the uh, electrons are negatively charged. Maybe in an alternate universe, they're positively charged. But for whatever reason, they're negatively charged here. And as that positron is emitted, it will find an electron and it annihilates and gives off a gamma ray.
Mm-hmm.
So what's cool about that is that you can use that as an imaging tool via MRI. So if you have a F18 or other positron emitting isotope attached to a molecule, you can see where it's localized in the body. So it's important for biodistribution of drugs. You need to know where a drug is localized, maybe if it
Yep.
crosses the blood-brain barrier, and then also to diagnose. You can develop probes to diagnose diseases such as various forms of cancer. And so, yeah, I was, I had this idea one day. I was like, I would love to see if we can do this F18 labeling stuff, right? And so, all right, definitely need a collaborator. I'm not doing that on my own. I don't know anything about nuclear chemistry. So I reached out to a guy in our radiology department here at UNC. His name is Zibo Lee. He's a professor. He runs the cyclotron facility, which is the machine that produces the positron emitting isotopes. And so I pitched this idea to him, and I didn't know his background or anything. So it turns out he has a degree, Ph.D. in organic chemistry. So it was easy to talk the science with him. I
Nice.
wasn't talking to somebody that didn't know the science. And I told him the idea I had, and he's like, "Oh, that sounds cool. Let's try it." And so that was I guess, about 6, 7 years ago, something like that. And Zibo has been the best collaborator I've ever had.
Mm.
We ended up developing a number of methods to do attach F18 and C11. And I should mention F18, the half life is 120 minutes. So
Yep.
you're talking about the chemistry, you have to have fast kinetics, right? Because the faster if the kinetics are too slow, you're going to have very little radioactivity in your sample at the end, and it's not going to be useful. So it presents some new challenges. But what I love about it is, hey, can we actually, develop chemistry that we can apply and is practical and maybe useful to the real world? And to me, that was the most exciting part. And so, long story short, we started a company a couple years ago called LED Radiofluidics, and basically we have a device on the market to produce certain radio tracers that are interesting to or of use to the field, as well as novel radio tracer molecules to detect diseases and various may image certain organs in the body. We have one that actually detects the parathyroid glands in the neck,
Oh wow.
and hope is that we can use hyperparathyroidism is a condition that a lot of people actually develop, and it can lead to various thyroid cancers.
Mm.
So often the treatment is removal of the parathyroid glands, which is inconsequential. You're fine after they're removed, but they're in about a third of the cases, doctors have a hard time finding the parathyroid glands. They're small, they move around, they can be hard to pick up with a normal CT scan. So we have a radio tracer in development. We're hoping to get it into patients maybe later this year or next year.
Oh wow.
That shows the parathyroid gland. It lights up really nicely. We have in a primate, we have an example, but we're hoping to actually put that in the patient so that it can aid surgeons in finding those parathyroid glands and removing them. So
Wow.
it's cool where the chemistry has come from basic science to something that's actually going to be
Yeah.
applied. And I think that's what I've always wanted to do. Never necessarily wanted to force it to happen, but when we saw an opportunity, we're going for it.
No,
So yeah,
absolutely. Well, a
yeah,
couple questions on that then, because I feel
yeah.
like a lot of people are going to hear. I'm kind of curious what the chemistry itself was, but one
Yeah.
is um, people will hear about um, isotopic labeling. It
Hmm.
emits a gamma ray. The question is
Hmm.
obviously, is this really safe? Then I feel like
Yeah,
it's going to be a
absolutely.
common question you get.
Yeah, I
So
think so. When we, in terms of dosing the patients, you're talking about hundreds of uh, microcurie in terms of radiation.
yeah,
Uh, I haven't done the exact math, but Zibo probably tells me you'd probably be exposed to more radiation standing out in the sun for 5 minutes than you would, So the and this is a major thing that the field has to obviously not overcome, but messaging is important and educating people that, hey, yes, the word nuclear sounds scary, the word radiation sounds scary, but the amounts we're talking about here and the benefits that it can have to patients are just incredible. Like I think the whole area of nuclear medicine and radiotherapeutics. We're actually starting a second company on developing therapeutic agents based off of sort of warhead type isotopes. That whole area, I think, is going to be a really fascinating area to watch. And I'm a little biased because I'm going to be in this area, but
of
I
course.
really do think that there's a lot of really exciting health advances, I think, in that area that we're going to see in the next 5 to 10 years. I think
Yeah.
it's going to change. People like to talk about personalized medicine, being able to image parts of the body or to detect diseases and personalize the treatment for the patient. I think is going to be an incredible outcome, and I think will be possible in the next 5 to 10 years. In some
Then
cases,
a couple questions then about that is one is how does the chemistry work? So I was kind of like reading up on this just a little bit, but you do aromatic halide introconversion. So one is how does that work mechanistically, right? Do you have to
yeah,
have a fluorine already installed?
yeah.
Um, so like,
So
and then how do you get the fluorine 18 on there?
yeah, great question. So first of all, fluorine 18 is made from heavy oxygen, so
Okay.
O18, which is a stable isotope, and you can take either hydroxide or you can take O18O2, and it's bombarded with protons, and essentially the F18 that way. Either F18 F2, which is nasty, right? Fluorine
It's,
gas, it's not going to be compatible with
it's
most
the
things. So
worst thing ever.
yeah, and to be quite honest, and this is another example where you can apply what you know in organic chemistry to other fields, and the other fields may not have the benefit of having the latest and greatest organic chemistry. And certainly before, I would say 10, 15 years ago, that was the case. I would point out another pioneer in this field, or two pioneers, is Veronique Governor at University of Oxford and Melanie Sanford, who have done some really awesome chemistry in the area. I don't want to forget to mention them as well, who have also inspired us to get in this field. So the way that we kind of approached it, and so, you know, I would say that, and Zibo would tell this too, is the chemistry has always been the tough part of this. You know, obviously handling radioisotopes and everything that goes with it, as long as you have the precautions in place and the equipment and infrastructure, that's all pretty straightforward. It's trying to get the chemistry to work. And fluorine is such a pain in the ass, to be honest. I mean, you know, fluoride isn't particularly nucleophilic. It likes the hydrogen bond, which, you know, it attenuates the nucleophilicity. It's you know, it etches glass, right? So you've got all these challenges with it. So the way that we approached it was our photooxidants are so potent in the excited state they can rip an electron out of an aromatic group.
Oh, wow.
So you get to a 5 pi electron species for a benzene. That makes it incredibly electrophilic. So we have an example where you can do CH fluorination. So you don't need to substitute the arene ring. And the terminal oxidant can either be an alkyl peroxide or it can be O2. And once the fluorine adds, you get to basically a doubly allylic radical that then has to go a second oxidation to get to a carbocation, and then you just lose a proton. So that chemistry works nice. The downside to that is the regioselectivity at times can be challenging. Mostly it goes para to the most electron-rich group in the molecule, but sometimes you get mixtures. And then also when you're wanting to inject the final molecule into a patient, it has to be analytically pure. So you have to usually, sometimes you have to purify it by HPLC, but ideally we want to get to these cartridge-based methods where you just run the sample through a cartridge and it cleans it up and it's analytically pure material. And we've gotten to that point now. But you touched on the fluorine exchange, which is one of my favorite reactions that we've done because it's so simple but so hard to do. So it's the same mechanism where you oxidize the fluoroaromatic ring, and it turns out the highest degree of positive charge density on the cation radical is the fluorine-bearing carbon. So the fluoride adds to the fluorine-bearing carbon, and then the fluorine-19 leaves, right? So obviously it's an exchange process, so it can go both ways, right? What drives it is that the fact that you always have more of fluorine-19 around. So you use the way that the positron emission tomography experiments work is you always have your fluorine-18 as your limiting reagent because that's your precious reagent, right?
Right.
And you have you have your substrate in excess. And so you always, fluorine-18 has a greater chance of going for the fluorine-19 than it does fluorine-18 just based on concentration difference. So it's nothing special. But the great thing is analytically pure material that comes out in the end, because all it is starting material, catalyst, which you remove via the cartridge filter, and it comes out clean. So yeah, and you know, the next step is, okay, yeah, and we get criticism of this in our papers, which is fair. You guys are doing photochemical methods. They're not going to have access to this in the clinic, and we totally agree. So
gotta start somewhere, though.
Yeah, it's got to start somewhere, and so that's why we started the company, which is to make devices so you can make the tracers on demand using the chemistry we developed. And so we just shipped out our first devices this week to a few different groups across the country and in other countries as well. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, we're excited that people want to try the chemistry, and you know, it's a starting point, and we're going to go further. But again, the things that you can do with the chemistry are exciting, and it's always, I think the students love to hear that people are using their chemistry to do something.
Absolutely.
Practical. is awesome. Yeah.
A couple of other questions that I have on this subject then is because how vital, well, luckily a lot of, like, let's say fluorochemical drugs, they already have aromatics in them, right? Because it's easiest
And
chemistry ever.
too.
Yeah. Like it's just the easiest chemistry ever to make those things. So luckily there's no niche applications, right? There are already plenty of molecules that have aromatics in them. Now, how necessary? I guess one of the next step is, could you do it on like aliphatics ones, or like does it have to be aromatic, or or even beyond that, does it have to be like a benzene derivative? Can it be like other, thiophenes, furands, indoles, and things like that? Like, can you also do it on those?
Great questions. So yeah, I would say we haven't done as much with aliphatic fluorine, CH fluorine 18, or any sort of aliphatic F18
Probably not even
production.
necessary, honestly. It's like
yes and no. I mean, so I would say Abby Doyle at UCLA has done really awesome work in this area, and there's certainly very valuable applications, because sometimes you do want the fluorine on there on the alkyl chain. It actually increases the lipophilicity and ability for the molecule to cross the into the cell. But we definitely are very interested in, or we think that the fluorine arine bonds present a bit more stable way to covalently link the fluorine to the molecules. And ultimately what you want when you make a radio tracer is you don't want that fluorine 18 to be, you don't want the carbon fluorine bond to be broken, because then you'll have just fluorine 18 washing through the bloodstream indiscriminately. And that's not what you want. Obviously you want to minimize patients' exposure to any radiation. And so you want it to go to the target where you want, and then clearance of that remaining F18 labeled material has to happen through the bladder, which is for an ideal PET agent. So, we haven't focused as much on the alkyl F18 formation. Like I said, I think Abby has done some really awesome work in that area, and it has some really nice applications. But I would say, for most molecules that are F18 labeled, the aromatic ones are, I would say, I'm making a generalization here, and I'm sure I'm wrong, but generally speaking, those seem to be a bit more stable than a lot of the alkyl.
Yeah. But moving on then to your photoredox catalysis, that's kind of like your the crown jewel, I guess, area in your for your research. Right. But you work a lot in dyes and new reactivity. I mean, really on the cutting edge of synthetic methodology.
Yep.
But I guess so. You work. Hopefully, I can pronounce this right. Acridinium.
Acridinium.
Acridinium. And acridine. Let's say based molecules. Well, one is what was the inspiration for these types of molecules to do your chemistry? Like, how did this all kind of work?
Yeah, good question. So acridiniums have been around for many decades. Again, they have been used as fluorescent dyes and things like that in biology and so forth for quite some time. And then I would say the early 2000s, this guy Shinichi Fukuzumi, who he's a physical organic chemist. He really made a key, I would say, modification to the acridiniums by putting this mezidyl group in the 9 position, and it changes the photophysics in a kind of funky way, because the acridinium singlet excited state is so oxidizing, it pulls an electron out of the mezidyl group, which is actually what we were I was just talking about for arine CH functionalization. But you get to an excited state where you oxidize the mezidyl group to a cation radical, and it reduces the acridinium to an acridyl radical. And that, in a lot of cases, is the oxidizing species. The thing also, I think, I'm not sure if, maybe the Fukuzumi and his lab realized at the time, but it really insulates the acridinium from attack by nucleophiles, which can deactivate the catalyst. So already it made it more robust by just putting a mezidyl group on there. And, when we first were getting involved, we wanted something that was oxidizing enough to remove an electron from an olefin. And there weren't that many, like the metal bipyridyl complexes like rubipi or the iridium complexes that do this are just not powerful enough in the excited state to do that. And so we started looking at organics and we're like, wow, these are pretty cool and they're simple molecules and they've been known for a long time. Let's see if we can play with those and modify them. And so the Fukuzumi catalyst is what we call it, was a great starting point for us. And then we modified that further by blocking the other electrophilic positions with these huge T-butyl groups, and then you replace the N-methyl group with an N-aryl group, and that also fluoride likes to demethylate actually that methyl acridinium just by nucleophilic displacement. And so if you put a phenyl group, you shut that down. So the modifications that we made to the catalyst make it far more stable. And in some cases, you can recycle the catalyst if you like. But honestly, the properties of the excited state reduction potential being above 2 volts versus SCE, that's exactly what we were looking for the chemistry we were doing. And again, they absorb in the visible. So we wanted to, we talk a lot about why we do visible light. We want to put all the energy into the catalyst excitation and not into the substrate where you can do maybe unwanted radical reactivity in the background. So that's kind of how we got involved in that area. And we've, honestly keep finding new tricks that the acridinium can do. It's a powerful photooxidant, but then we recently found that if the reduced form, the acridyl radical, which is a stable, persistent radical, not an unstable radical, we can store it in the glove box. As long as you don't show it oxygen, it's fine. But that acridyl radical species can also absorb a photon. And when it achieves the excited state, it becomes a potent reductant. So we took something that's a really potent oxidant and turned it into a really potent reductant. Wow. It's more reducing than lithium metal, which is wild, right? We've got a lot of reactions to support that hypothesis. And so far, it's been. I kind of joke that I probably could spend the rest of my career studying acridinium, and the photochemistry, and it does. And so far, we're on 14 years and running.
Yeah.
So.
It seems like, it just seems like the limitations are kind of endless in this, because it seems like
you're just moving electrons around at the end of the day, right?
Right. That's all chemistry is, really. It's just flowing electrons.
Yeah, one or two at a time, right?
Yeah. But yeah, a couple of your recent publications that really kind of caught my eye was doing like oxycyanation, which enantioselective oxycyanation, that I thought was really cool.
Thank you.
I know that was kind of a recent publication. And hopefully I assume areas in your lab will be working on like how the enantioselectivity comes into play. I assume that's kind of like active area research, but
yeah. So that chemistry was based off of two things. One, we had done some anti-Markovnikov chemistry back in the early part of my career, where you again oxidize an olefin to the cation radical, and the nucleophile, in this case, alcohol or an amine, adds to the less substituted position. You're left with a radical at the more substituted position. And so you can cap that with a hydrogen atom transfer, blah, blah, blah. But we wanted to look at difunctionalization of alkenes, where we control the regiochemistry in ways that polar reactions it would be challenging or hard to do. And so, there's been a lot of really beautiful chemistry with copper capturing radical species, and particularly Shannon Stahl and Guosheng Lu's work on generation of benzylic radicals that they are able to capture with a copper cyanide species that then reductively eliminate to give this copper cyanide bond. And so one of my students, this is actually an idea that came from a student, said, hey, can we look at that, like combining those two ideas and seeing if we can get this oxycyanation to go or aminocyanation to go enantioselectively. And it turned out that it worked really nicely. We had to modify the Stahl-Lu conditions just a little bit, but for the most part, the ligand set that we found was similar to what they used in their chemistry, and that ended up working really nicely. And so, so controlling enantioselectivity is a huge challenge in radical chemistry, and I know Teshik Yoon likes to talk a lot about that, and I agree with what he says. Is and he's certainly been on a mission to control enantioselectivity in radical reactions and done some really nice work in that area. But there's certainly a lot of other really outstanding contributions in that area. But yeah, it's a tough one. One of my favorite approaches is Torsten Bach's method, where he has some hydrogen bonding, going on in his chiral photocatalyst that's able to control enantioselectivity for some reactions. And I think some of the stuff he's done is really fantastic. Great guy too. But it's I think so. These are some of the challenges I think that are still not solved by any stretch of the imagination, and certainly having copper do that with a chiral ligand set is great. We tried doing this with chiral anions. So because you get to cation radical species, you have a charged species, and we thought having our catalyst with a chiral anion that could ion pair in solution may control the selectivity. And we had some success in some Diels-Alder reactions that are electron rich. They don't go typically, but if you remove an electron from one of the two components, it facilitates that in a more stepwise manner. But Ben List's group actually recently published much higher enantioselectivities than we were able to get using some of their really gigantic IDPI catalysts that the chiral anions. And I think that's pushing certainly the boundaries of what we can do right now with enantioselective catalysis and in radical reactions. So I think it's it's cool, but there's certainly a lot more to do in this area for sure.
Right. Yeah, I guess as we kind of wrap up here, one of the other questions is like, where do you foresee, let's say, what are not necessarily in your lab, but like photoredox catalysis in general? What are the active areas that people are trying to solve? And like, how do you see it playing out over the next 5-10 years about this area in particular?
Yeah. No, I think, like I said, control of enantioselectivity is certainly one. I think that, it's hard to say. I mean, I'm always amazed at how quickly people have adopted and really kind of expanded the area in ways that I certainly didn't envision. And, I think the problems are, well, one, I think we're starting to apply this to more biological sort of questions and problems. And, I know Dave MacMillan's group is certainly doing some of this with this mu mapping, chemistry that they're doing to map cell surfaces and so forth. Obviously we're trying to do this to implement it into biological applications, but I think that the challenges that certainly remain are being able to, selectively modify any CH bond in a molecule that you want and choose which one you want. Certainly we can use the principles of, CH bond strengths and this and that. And my colleague, my next door neighbor here at work, Eric Alexanian, has done some really awesome chemistry in this area. And he's developed some reagents that take advantage of the electronics and sterics of the hydrogen atom abstracting agent to really steer where you go. But we're still not at the point where we can 100% say, I want to, especially for medchem or agrochemical discovery, right? They have a lead target and they want to say, hey, I want to put a substituent at this position. There's no chemistry to do that. That's where it would be great if we could come in and do that. I have, visions of trying to do this using vibrational activation. It's a really challenging problem that I don't fully understand all the physics behind it yet, and I'm trying to learn a bit more and want to spend. I have some sabbatical coming up next year, and I want to spend a little more time reading and maybe talking to the right people. But I really do think that's where, I would love to see if we could develop methods that, like I said, I want to target that CH bond or CO bond or CC bond. Like, there aren't as many methods to cleave carbon-carbon bonds, right? And carbon-carbon bond activation is super challenging. There's really only a handful of, I would say, reliable synthetic methods, out there. I think Guangbin Dong has done some really nice work in this area of carbon-carbon bond activation. But these are things that I think uh, are real challenging problems for organic chemistry to address. And I think not only photoredox catalysis, but I'm excited to see what the next big area is going to be, right? Like we
Right.
talked about earlier, science in general goes through, phases where people are really interested in one big idea or whatever. And I'm interested to see what that next big idea is. If I knew what it was, I'd be doing it, as a lot of people have said. But I do think that the problems that you want to try and solve motivate and drive the science, and
Yeah.
that's how I've always approached it. And hopefully we can find something really exciting to follow that up with. But
Yeah. It's exciting. It's an exciting time. Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned too, like to be able to regioselectively, let's say, like functionalize CH bonds through a photoredox way would
yeah,
be incredibly cool.
yeah,
But like Professor Andy McNally will probably test this too. Is that it was only really kind of recently they were able to do it meta selective through a two
hmm
electron fashion. So
yeah,
like,
really
I
cool
mean,
idea. Hmm
like it's it's extremely challenging. Let's just put it
Yeah,
that way. And it's only up until really now that we've just learned how to do meta selective CH functionalization through various strategies. But um, you know,
absolutely.
but to do it through a single electron fashion, listen, it seems, and to selectively do it, that seems incredibly challenging. But
It
through
is.
through
There's
this,
a
go
Yeah,
ahead, go
there's a
ahead.
paper. I'm not sure if it's been published yet, but it was on Chem Archive by this guy Omiya. He's in is he in Osaka? I forget where he's from in Japan, but anyway, he basically so our system where you do the Aryan CH functionalization, we had ideas to capture, because you generate a radical that's meta to where your nucleophile, or ortho to where your nucleophile adds, and that actually would constitute a meta functionalization. We
Mm,
tried for years to get this to work. We got some tantalizing results, never got anywhere. And Omiya published something where they took NHC catalysis plus photoredox catalysis and did meta acylation of Aryan. Really cool stuff. Just mad that we didn't think
of
of that
course.
idea.
Yeah,
But we were sniffing around the right idea, just weren't looking at the right transformation to do there. And credit to them that they did some really nice work there. But yeah,
that's awesome.
McNally's ideas on the meta functionalization for the Ph.D. really awesome stuff. I think going to be very useful as well. So yeah.
That was my second year seminar topic was meta selective CH functionalization.
Oh yeah.
I had to give
Cool.
a seminar for our department, and
Uh huh.
Andy McNally's work was definitely a part of that. And that was to be honest, after a few months of like, because you know how it is, putting together a presentation, second year graduate student, I was starting to get fed up with it. Like I was tired of like looking at this stuff. But looking back on it now, I'm glad I selected that topic because it was a really fun one. Um,
Yeah, it's a
but
challenging one. There's not really a lot out there in terms of meta functionalization.
mhm.
So
But who knows? I mean, like we mentioned, one of the there's a lot of unknowns. Well, I shouldn't say a lot of unknowns, but there's a lot of promise to do photoredox catalysis, single electron transfer. Who knows? I mean, um, maybe it'll be
yeah,
easier to do. Who knows? And so
yeah.
it's an exciting time.
There's a lot of great people out there doing a lot of really awesome science, and I'm convinced that a lot of these things too. It's wild that so many people have similar ideas at the same time. There's a lot of
Hmm.
incidents in that, but yeah, I'm confident that I think organic chemistry will find what its next big thing is going to be in terms of ways to catalyze or activate bonds. And I don't know what that'll be, but
right. That's the beauty of it too.
I'm excited to see it, and I hope we're doing it.
Right. Well, Dave, I want to thank you so much for coming on to the podcast today. Such a fun episode.
Yeah.
And
got to talk about a little football and a little bit of chemistry.
That's the beauty of it. I mean, that makes my day. Sunday's North London Derby. I'll be watching that. Either it'll be a really good week next week or a really bad week next week. We'll see.
I think you guys will do all right. I think I like the vibes on Tottenham at the moment. One of my good buddies is Korean, and he loves Son. He's
who doesn't, man?
Yeah, I mean, he's a phenomenal player, so he's fun to watch. So I'll hopefully see something good from him on Sunday.
I hope so. I mean, this is the most excited I've been for a North London Derby in like 3 years now, because and the fact that it's at the Emirates too. If we play exciting football and we lose a thriller. What more can I ask for? Though, it's like I just want to see exciting football again, and it's going to be the Emirates will be rocking. It'll be rocking for that one.
I'm sure it'll
somewhere. I'm going to have to go somewhere and watch that game. Honestly, go grab a pint somewhere.
Good football bar in Houston.
They actually have. Well, there's a Tottenham bar that I go to, which is nice. But there's a place called Pitch 25 here, which is right across the street from the Houston Dynamo Stadium. And like during like obviously the MLS games, but any like big soccer matches, big football matches, they'll put on the games. And there's an indoor soccer field inside the bar, but this bar is like this sweet bar. So like they have like tables you can see like the pitch, where like it's like pickup soccer, but they also have like leagues. But then they also have an outdoor area where they have like a big screen. They have an outside bar. It's just a great vibe for anyone's a fan of football. Like, highly recommend Pitch 25 here in Houston.
I had a funny story. So I live in Durham, which is the next town over where Duke University is actually.
Yeah. But great football in school too. By the way.
I started the first time I went and watched a football match at one of the local pubs here. I went for the Arsenal Liverpool match, and I'm coming up to the bar and I see everybody in red, and I'm like, oh sweet, it's a bunch of Liverpool supporters.
Oh no,
that bar is an Arsenal bar.
Oh no!
And I had to keep my mouth shut the whole time. And then this was a match where Liverpool, I think they destroyed Arsenal like 4-1 or something like that. And the first goal scored, and I couldn't help it. I just let it rip, and it was everybody at the bar.
I wouldn't. I could feel the cringe. I can't imagine being in. Oh man.
They were cool about it. One of the guys, he was actually from the UK. He came up to me afterwards. He's like, "I like your courage. I'm buying your next beer."
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it was fun.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad I'm coining. Listen, football in Texas means something else. Like when people say football in Texas,
football in Texas.
No, they don't. I'm coining it now.
Not that football.
That's what I'm saying. Exactly. When I say, I'm watching a football match on the weekend, they're like, oh, wait, what college football game you watching? I'm like, nah, real football. No. I get a lot of dirty looks, which is it's funny. But
Houston's a pretty as a melting pot, right? You have so many different cultures there, which is cool, and great food scene in Houston. But it's got to be the football, the true football, is getting more and more popular in that area, no?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you mentioned, melting pot of like a lot of like Hispanic culture. So, I mean, the Liga MX leagues is really popular here, and all even like all the South American countries in general, their leagues, the Brazilian league, Argentinian league, like there's a huge fan base here.
Yep.
Now the Houston Dynamo kind of stink, honestly, but football is it's growing here in Houston for sure, especially now with all.
Maybe Messi will help, revive football in the U.S. again and bring it to the level.
I mean, he's already brought it to a new level. Like the fact that he's on Inter Miami still like mind boggles me. Honestly, it's like crazy.
I know
because he's in well, you're not Charlotte anymore, but he'll have an MLS match against Charlotte FC. Like he'll be in Charlotte, which is crazy.
I know. Yeah, I'd love to go see him play. I've never seen him play in person. I think he's probably phenomenal player to ever touch the pitch.
I think he's number one ever. I don't know if you have a different opinion. I think it's hard to argue otherwise, honestly.
Yeah, I just when he touches the ball, it's magic. It's just pure magic. Yeah. So,
but football, I would say football is in good hands.
Yep.
You know, excited weekend. Liverpool got West Ham this weekend. As we wrap up here, any initial thoughts? You feel nervous against West Ham because David Moyes right now has got them.
Always tough. They're always a scrappy team. It's never an easy match. I see us pulling out a 2-1 victory. You know, it'll be a late winner. I think Tottenham's got a really good shot against Arsenal. I would say draw or maybe Arsenal or maybe Tottenham by a goal.
Really, you got more faith in this than even I do.
It's the psyche of the team. I think that their heads are in the right spot, and there's some X factor there that is hard to put your finger on. But sometimes teams, when they have the right attitude, they all of a sudden just they overachieve, and Tottenham could be that team. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. I hear you. I think, I mean, we really have nothing to lose, honestly. I feel like the pressure's on Arsenal, obviously, because they're home and they're the ones that are in the title race, really. So, the pressure's on them to win.
Arteta has done an amazing job with Arsenal. I think, he absolutely deserves a lot of credit and turned the team around since Wenger left. And so, I really, it's going to be fun. I hope it's a really scrappy dogfight all the way to the end. It comes down to the last season, to decide the premiership. That would be incredible. I love a nail biter.
Right. Well, last thing I'll say is Liverpool. They got West Ham this weekend. Liverpool should win this game.
I think so.
But the way that Liverpool plays right into West Ham's hands, though. Counter-attacking, low block. James Ward-Prowse, Mikel Antonio, Lucas Paqueta.
Yeah. And I think we have Van Dijk back finally after that red card, which was unfortunate. But you need him in there. Has been a little shaky at times, but
Alisson will bail you out, though. He'll bail you out.
Yeah, and then Salah will probably produce some magic like he always does. Phenomenal player.
You'll need him between Salah and Luis Diaz. I mean. Something out of nothing, just something like that.
I love Diaz. He is just wiry and scrappy, and he has that cutting style of play that I love to watch. And
he's definitely one of my favorite players to watch in the league for sure.
Yeah,
Luis Diaz, he's that good.
Is, Bobby Firmino. He was probably one of my favorite Liverpool players after Steven Gerrard.
He was the linchpin. I mean,
yeah.
When you guys made those deep Champions League run, he was the linchpin of that offense for sure. I mean, Mane and Salah get all the credit, but I mean, it's hard to argue Firmino's contributions to that.
Firmino is a special player for sure. Yeah.
So, But well, Dave, thank you again for coming on the podcast today. Fun episode, and I look forward to your science that comes out. If I'm ever in Chapel Hill, I'll have to see the lab and come by.
Yeah, get a beer.
Get some Guinness.
Yeah,
get some Guinness. But thank you again. And, thank you guys. Have a good one.